WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, our website, www.wvtcradio.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users. Thank you for tuning to WVTC Radio Detroit and the Community Bell Show with your host, former Wayne County Commissioner, Edna Bell. Stay tuned for insightful information Detroiters will find valuable. Text a friend and tell them to watch with you for news you can use. And now, your host, Edna Bell.
Hello, everyone. It's Monday at 4, so it must be the Community Bell Show. We're so glad to have you with us on this wonderful, wonderful Monday afternoon in Detroit. It's sunny, it's beautiful, and it isn't even real cold. So isn't that a blessing? But we're just happy to have you with us on the Community Bell Show on this wonderful Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Well, again, Monday is Community Bell Show. We've got a very, very special guest with us today. She's got all sorts of information. She does all sorts of wonderful things, and we're going to talk about a lot of the things that she does. So we're just absolutely honored to have with us Dr. Iris Taylor. She has been around Detroit for a long time doing great things, and we're happy to have her with us today to talk to us about some of the things that she's involved in. You need to know, and I'll tell you that she is a former Detroit Public School Board member and is looking to be returned to that body. She's a candidate for Detroit Public School Board for the election on November the 8th, everybody. So this is a day when we start talking about what you need to do as a person in this community who cares about this community, and that is voting. Everybody needs to do that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But right now, we're going to welcome Iris Taylor to our show. Iris, welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you so very much. I'm delighted to be with you.
We just kind of talk on the show, and we talk about whatever it is the guest wants to talk about, and I throw a few things in every now and then as we move along. But tell us about Dr. Taylor. For those of you who don't know Dr. Taylor, she's going to give you a kind of a little background on who she is and where she's been and what she's doing. Dr. Taylor, it's on you.
All right. Well, I am a native of the city of Detroit, raised in Detroit, and went to Detroit public schools, graduated from Central High School.
Okay, see, I was going to
I
ask you that. East side or west side? You know, that's always the question Detroiters ask, east side or west side. So you just
That's
told
the
us.
West Side, Central High
West side.
School
All
on the
right.
West Side. I
All
am a
right.
proud trailblazer. That was our theme, Trailblazers. So that's who I am from the city of Detroit. From there, I went to Wayne State University, and I have 3 degrees from Wayne State University: bachelor's in nursing, a master's in nursing, and my doctorate in sociology. And I also have a fellowship from the Wharton Business School in administration. So that's kind of my background. I'm a certified mediator. So
Okay.
among my skill sets in being an administrator, I have the skill sets and the talents to bring people to reconciliation in a mediated format. So that's kind of who I am, or what I am. Who I am really is an individual who is grounded in her faith, who is grounded and loves the city of Detroit. So I have done an enormous amount of volunteer work in the city of Detroit. I was raised to believe that if you achieved anything, then you had an obligation to give back. So I have been doing volunteer work since my teenage years, and I continue to do that. And every child across the city of Detroit that's been in my presence has also been required to do some kind of volunteer work in the course of the year. So that's who and what I am. Um,
That's so important as we talk about young people and helping them understand that they have an obligation to themselves, but to the community also, to give back. For those who have been given much, much is required. And I know both of us believe that. And when you talk about young people, particularly in our generation now, we have to help them understand that giving back is a part of taking care of yourself and your community. Because if we don't do
Absolutely.
that, what else matters? But there's something I want you to talk about that I think is so important right now. And you talked about mediating. Boy, do we need people who know how to mediate situations and bring people together and stop people from fighting and doing all these other things that are causing our community such damage. Talk about that.
Well, it's a skill set that you can learn, and it's also a skill set that you're blessed to have. And I have been fortunate enough to have it in both categories. I went to Oakland University to get certified in terms of the proper training to become a mediator. But I also have the skill sets that I was adorned with in the ability to bring people together, to come to a conclusion around differences of opinion, to move forward in a common way. I use it a lot in my career. As you know, I was an administrator in healthcare for over 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
retiring as president of Detroit Receiving Hospital and the Detroit Medical Center. And at one time was president of Harper Hutzel in the Detroit Medical Center. And at one time was the chief nursing officer and the chief business officer. So I feel served in several leadership roles in the Detroit Medical Center. And part of our daily life in the medical center, you end up having to reconcile differences between people, reconcile differences around situations to determine what is the best course of action to take. So you use that skill set across a numerous number of events and platforms. And I've been blessed to be able to do that in an effective way. And I try to, in the presence of the young folks that I'm with, to try to pass some of that on so that they begin to acquire some of those same skills.
As you talk about that, that is a skill also that could be very, very useful. And I'm sure was useful when you were a member of the school board and will be useful when you return to the school board, of helping your colleagues and community organizations, community representatives see that there is the common ground, mediate those situations and bring them together. Because Lord knows right now, we've got some situations in our city, um, whether it be school or anywhere else, that people need to figure a way to get it right, to figure a way to get together and do the right thing without a lot of craziness and squabbling and killing and shooting and all those kinds of things going on. Talk a little bit about how that could be useful in the school system.
Well, it's a 7-member board and it's a policy board, not an operation board. But in setting the policies and the directions, that part of your responsibility is strategically to help develop and cultivate a strategic direction for the school system.
Mm-hmm.
That means that 7 people have to bring to bear their responsibility to their constituents. Our first responsibility and focus is the children of the city of Detroit. And then how do we bring communities and families along so that we not only understand the needs of the school system, but we're able to develop policies and procedures and structures that will lead us to successfully providing excellent opportunity for children to learn. That in itself is a monumental task, and one that we have to continue to work on, because of course 7 people come to the table with 7 mindsets. And if we can't find a common ground, such as what is the focus, why are we here, which is the children, and then what is the primary strategic thing we're trying to accomplish, and let that be the guiding post for how we make decisions, because that is the one thing that we all agree upon. And that's kind of how you have to begin to navigate your relationships in a policy board format.
Absolutely. And as you do that, what are some of the things that you would want to concentrate on as a school board member?
I think that our focus the first 4 years when we came on in 2017 was to rebuild an infrastructure, to focus in on developing a process for improvement. And that occurred. And so the reform work was evident when we became the highest performing reform program in the state of Michigan prior to the pandemic. So returning to the board, I think this is an opportune time post-pandemic to get focused back on the reform work, to have an opportunity to invest in our infrastructure, which originally the funding for DPSCD didn't allow structural improvement. So in the advent of the pandemic, we've had an opportunity to get some hardware funds that will be able to do some structural reinvesting. And I think that as we focus on a child, we have an opportunity to look at what are the disparities that occurs before a learning opportunity can occur. And one of them is to look at mental health, physical health, and the other social determinants that challenge a child before they even get to school. And I'd like to see that roll out in a health hub manner. DPS currently has 12 hubs. They're all geared around feeder patterns of elementary, middle school, high school environments. They were sort of really heightened in its operations during the pandemic when we had all these electronic devices, 52,000 of them distributed, and people needed assistance to use the device, assistance in getting connected. And so rather than everybody running to one location, the superintendent created these hubs. I think there's an opportunity to nurture that concept and heighten it a step more by making the health hubs available not only to the enrollee in DPSCD, but in their families, their siblings, and their adult people who
Mm-hmm.
are in the home that care for them, so that these hubs would be accessible sometimes prior to school, sometime after school, and maybe a couple of times a month on a Saturday, so that whether it's physical health, whether it's dental, whether it's mental health, which is greatly needed in support of families, that we have a parent peer counselor available, that we have access to a social worker. So rather than to say, let's look at what services we can provide because a family got evicted, how about preventing the eviction? Because
There.
we had an opportunity to connect to them and get them to the right resources that prevented the eviction, as opposed to trying to find something to respond to an eviction. Mental health, which is critical, it not only needs to be available in the health hubs, but I think we have to look at across the entire platform. The students, as well as the faculty,
Mm-hmm.
need to understand and be able to, for example, identify the triggers of suicide ideology, so that instead of us hearing about the student who attempted suicide, we have an opportunity to prevent that attempt because someone identified some key signs and symptoms and reported it, and we got some assistance or some help for that family and that for that child. I would like to see not only that be formulated and implemented, but that we structure it in such a way that it has a 20-year lifespan, not a program with a short start and end, but a
Yes,
20-year lifespan. So if we have a chance to change the trajectory of a generation, then the resources have to be around for more
absolutely.
than a year or two. And then
Absolutely.
perhaps the next generation, all they know is the next level of survival and thriving, and not the prior things that the prior generation had to experience. So ultimately, that would be my vision, to want to see that we not only addressed these disparities, but that we did it in such a way that it had a sustainable lifespan.
Absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned that because my youngest grandchild was 14 yesterday. So we had her birthday dinner and all that kind of good stuff. But the conversation led to uh, our kids are going to be fine, but they've got to live in a world with other children. So we've got to make sure that all the children are okay. And
Exactly.
as we talked about that, we talked about what happened. How did we lose this generation of kids? Because I think that's what happened. Somewhere between the late 80s and the 90s, we lost a group of kids and their parents. And now we're seeing the effect of what happened. And it could have been the drug culture, the cocaine that a lot of these people were hooked on, and uh, didn't know how to get off, and it translated to another generation. But that generational piece is what we have to work on. And you're so right when you say it can't be a 2 or 3 year program. It's got to be 10, 20 years to have some kind of visible impact. And then you talked about homelessness. My daughter just had sold one of her houses, but the people that that bought it are renting it to someone for $1,500 a month. That's what they're asking. I can't imagine that. But I'm told that $1,500 is the going rate for rental of properties in Detroit now. That to
I'm
me is
not surprised.
and it's insane because you're not talking about heat and electricity and internet and all those other things. You're talking about $1,500 a month for the house. Then you're talking about $2,000 for a house. Who can afford that? I think homelessness is going to increase, and we've got to find a way, as you said, to address the impact of homelessness and try to find a way for them not to be homeless in the first place.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly. So
And
my desire in running for the school board is that because I'd like to be a participant in carving out what the direction or the trajectory of the school board will go in the future, and building in those infrastructure and pieces that will allow the effective programs that are in place to have a sustainability, and that we begin to look at succession planning so that we have like-minded individuals who want to invest in DPSCD moving forward, who, while the activities may be different with different board members, but the overall focus and direction will sustain itself because it's in a positive way that has a positive impact for the children of the city of Detroit. And so that's why I'm running for the board again. I'd like to be a part of charting that future for DPSCD. And that's what my commitment and investment is. I'd like to see the health hubs up and running at 100% capacity, and that it provides equitable
Mhm.
access to all the families, and that we have an individual to reach out to families so that you can get them to understand that this resource is available to them so that they'll take advantage of that resource.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as we talk about making sure that we can sustain the kinds of programs that are going to be helpful for the children and their families, um, we need to talk about one of the main things, and that's absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism in Detroit is an issue that I think we all need to deal with, and all need to try to find a way to take care of. And when we talk about chronic absenteeism for children, we're not just talking about the children, it's a family issue. And so we have to deal with those kinds of family issues that cause absenteeism. Homelessness obviously is one of them. But there are so many other kinds of issues that children are going through that cause them to be absent. And I just hate to say it, but sometimes the parents are the ones we got to work on, because, for instance, K through 5, those babies can't get themselves to school. It is not their fault if they're absent.
Exactly.
It's the adults in the family that have to get them to school. And so we have to make sure that whatever the issues are, that we can help that family adjust to it and get those babies to school. And so, as we talk about that, I've been told, and I was volunteering over at one of the schools last year, and one of the big issues they talked about, number one, illnesses, and the school was able to let them know that there's a nurse in the school, and if you need anything, you can call the nurse, or the nurse will be glad to assist you, and that helps some. But the other one was transportation. And transportation appears to be a big issue for some families. And one of the reasons I think is that we don't have community schools the way we used to. Children can't walk to school, or don't walk to school the way they did when we were in school, because we had lots of schools we could walk. I don't think there was anybody that was 6 blocks or more away from where they could go to school. That's an issue. How do you think we might be able to attack transportation now?
Well, as we're looking at how he has structured the health hubs, there are a series of schools that are focusing around that hub. They're in proximity or close to each other. And it also looks at certain schools that, in terms of infrastructure investment, that some that will fix up, but others that will need to tear down and relocate buildings that do just that, create the community school hub approach, that communities feel that they're connected to the schools that are in their area. As far as transportation is concerned, there is a modest amount of transportation that DPSCD already provides. And I
Mhm.
think that's an area that can be examined to look at what are the current needs and have they changed from when that original system was designed.
Mhm. When I was working with this community, this nonprofit, it was called Helping Kids Go to School, and we talked to a lot of parents, sent out a survey, and I started looking at addresses, and many of these children who were having problems getting to school was because they didn't live anywhere near the school. I happened to have been volunteering at McKinsey, and we had kids who lived over by Pershing High School who were coming to McKinsey, and they were absent because somebody's car didn't start, or somebody couldn't take them to school, and of course the transportation hub does not go that far from Wyoming and Chicago over the 7 Mile and Ryan Road. And so is there some kind of thought to help parents understand that your kid needs to go to school close to where he lives?
Well, part of that reaching out so that you get them reestablished to their community school, that's a part of that, so that they have a sense of confidence that the school can meet the needs of the children, that they don't, or the child, that they don't have to send the child all the way over to the other side of the city to get the same quality education.
And you are so right. That's exactly what they said. But I don't like that school where I live. I want to go to the one over there. And so
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. We've got to give them confidence that all the schools can provide a quality education, and the children are going to be safe in whatever Detroit public school they attend.
Correct.
Let's talk about safety. I've had parents tell me that they don't feel that their children are safe in school. What can the Detroit public schools do to help them have more confidence that their children are going to be safe?
I know that they've done a safety environment assessment to determine a rating for each school or in terms of the level of safety and what sort of plan needs to be developed for that particular school. I think that's a process that needs to be ongoing as we look at what happens in the environment.
Hmm. And you're right about that. And then the other piece is that needs to be communicated to the parents, so the parents know, because oftentimes they just don't know, and we have to find a way of effectively communicating with parents that this is what we've done, this is why we believe your children are going to be safe, these are the things that go on in your child's school, so that we can help ensure the safety of the children, the parents, and the staff, because that's a big part of that safety piece, is that staff needs to feel comfortable also.
That is absolutely correct. But if staff is also participating in the development and implementation of the safety plan, then there's also another level of confidence.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that a lot of parents don't know, because they talk about how schools are funded. Many of them still don't know that we have two systems that are getting money. The old system that the state screwed up, excuse my language, but the state just made a mess of, that we've got to pay for, and the new system that receives money from the state to fund the activities. And what they don't realize is that the property tax dollars are going to pay off the old debt. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, when DPSCD was formed, the legislative statute allowed the old system, Detroit Public Schools, to continue to receive the property tax. Those dollars come into DPSCD, but they're directed directly to the identified vendors or companies that are listed in the bankruptcy at the time for DPSCD. And so it goes to retire the debt. It was determined at the time of origin that it was probably a 30-year period of time to completely retire 100% of the debt for the Detroit public school system. The Detroit Public Schools Community Districts, DPSCD, which is currently functioning now, is funded by the state of Michigan. That does not at all come from any of the property taxes. It is a predetermined amount that is allocated for delivery of educational programming. It does not allow for any reinvestment into infrastructure. So it's not built for you to build resources that you can use to build buildings or to do massive repairs or improvements to the actual physical structure. So that's how the system is designed, which is why the desire to have to identify other dollars to be able to invest in infrastructure becomes a critical component. But in the state of Michigan, period, the pupil funding for the state of Michigan is really not equitable. It's really not designed
No.
so that every child has an opportunity every day in every classroom to have an opportunity to thrive and access to quality public education. So special needs children alike don't necessarily in the school systems have all the resources necessary for them to be successful. It's not funded to that level. So Michigan could use a complete overhaul in the per pupil funding for education, period, so that we do create equitable access by creating equitable funding by according to the child's need.
You're absolutely right. And I think parents don't really understand that we don't have the kind of resources that some of the other school systems have because of this split that the state, in my estimation, the state caused all the problem. The state should have written it off, and we should not have to use the taxpayer funded property taxes to pay off that debt. But that's probably for another, that's a lot of conversation, probably for another show. But that one really, really gets me, that other school systems are able to tax themselves if they choose with property taxes to enhance whatever they want to. And don't have that ability.
That's correct.
But that's something that we probably need to march about. But I won't march today. But I tell you, it really does irk me that we don't have those kinds of opportunities to do what other school systems do, and to help our babies to the level that we would like, simply because of some folk who were there 20 years ago who didn't have the best interests of Detroit at heart.
Correct. Correct.
And we see it all the time, and it's just unfortunate that we have not yet been able to handle that. But I just believe that at some point in time, we're going to be able to address that issue. I want to talk a little bit to people in the community about the election so that they know what's coming. Everybody, there is an election coming. I had people tell me back in August they didn't know there was primary going on. I said, how could you? But and they were very sincere. And a lot of them were those young people between 18 and 30 who are not as maybe connected to political organizations and all of that, who told me they didn't know there was an election going on. I drove around the city on election day and I said, well, why did you vote? I didn't know there was an election going on. So we've got to find a way to help these young people understand that there's an election coming, and it's an important election. I mean, we're talking about people who are going to be looking at the lives of our babies, people who are going to be setting rules for a long period of time, and we just need to find a way to help them understand. So, I went and did a little bit of stuff going on here, and I wrote a lot of stuff down, but November 8th, and we'll talk about this every Monday. November 8th is election day, everybody. November the 8th is election day. And if you don't plan to go to the polls, absentee ballots are going out right now. So look at your mail. Absentee ballots are going out. You need to know that, and you need to make sure you fill out your absentee ballot and vote for those people that you believe are going to do the best for you and your family. Absentee ballots are going out. Find your ballot. If you don't have it, if you want one, you can still get one. But find your ballot and vote. Election is November the 8th. And we'll talk next week about some of the things you're going to be voting on. But today, I just want you to know that absentee ballots are out there. And absentee ballots are important. Go get your ballot. If you've got it sent to you, vote. Vote for people that you think are going to take care of you. People like Dr. Iris Taylor. People who know what's going on, who have helped already. Vote for people like that. Don't just vote for somebody because they got a nice name or because, oh, that's my friend. Ask your friend what kind of credentials they have. What makes them the kind of person you should vote for? What have they done? What have they done to prove that they can make a decision based on logic, based on being able to read, write, and compute, Ask them. Don't just vote for them because they're nice people. Vote for them because they can take care of our babies. I mean, you need to vote for people who know how to read a balance sheet, who understand where the money comes from and how to spend it, and understand the budget, and who understand a budget of not just $1,000. We're talking about $1 billion. We're talking about lots of money. So vote for people who understand what's going to happen and how to make it happen, who can bring something to the table to help our babies. I'm sorry, I just got carried away. Dr. Taylor, go ahead and talk about some stuff you want to talk about, Dr. Taylor.
No, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. We have to encourage everyone. Every election is an important election. Every time there is election, the fact that a lot of our ancestors fought for our ability to be able to go out and make a choice. And we have an obligation to not only respect what their struggles were, but to respect the fact that we do have access. And if we don't use the access, we're going to lose the access. And
Absolutely.
more and more, they're going to restrict our ability to what we can do. That we have to voice our rights and use our right to vote as one of the vehicles to stop the suppression that occurs in our society.
Absolutely. And there is a proposal on the November 8th ballot here in Michigan that talks about that voting, that will make it a part of your constitution, that you can vote. You can vote absentee. You can vote if you have an ID. If you don't have an ID, you can sign an affidavit that says I am who I say I am. There are ways to vote. But that proposal is on the ballot. Isn't it incredible? Here we are in 2022, and we're still talking about putting things on the ballot that allow us to vote in a reasonable way. Absolutely amazing. But that proposal is on the ballot. So look at it. Look at what's on the ballot. We'll talk about some of the other ballot proposals as we go along in the next few weeks. But people, you've got to get out there and vote. And then the first thing you want to say is what they did to you. They can't do it if you vote. Everybody ought to be embarrassed that only 13% of the people in this election back in August voted. How insane is that, Detroiters? If you want to be able to determine your own destiny, you have to get to the polls and vote. You can't let somebody else make that decision for you. You can't let 13% of the people make decisions for 100% of the people. And that's what happens when you don't vote. And you don't have the right to say anything to anybody about anything if you didn't vote.
Absolutely.
And I will always tell you, don't talk to me if you didn't vote. Don't complain to me about anything if you didn't vote, because you don't have that right. It's everybody's responsibility to get out there and take care of what needs to be done to make sure we're all successful, but particularly to make sure that the babies are successful. There are 17 or 18 people running for the school board. Help me, Jesus. All of these people are not qualified to be on the school board. I'm sorry. Now, I just need to tell you folks that. So you need to look at the candidates, find out who they are, look at their background, see if they've handled budgets in the millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. See if they understand what that means. See how they have dealt with people and community groups in the past. That's important. That's how you determine whether or not that person is going to be a good person for our school board to take care of our children, to take care of our staff members and our teachers. That's what it is. Dr. Taylor, any closing remarks?
As we look at the upcoming election and in particularly my candidacy, I'd just like to say that it is my heart's desire that every day, every child in every classroom has an opportunity to thrive and access to quality public education. And that whatever we do, that we stay focused on the child so that we can identify needs and build in systems to address those needs in a positive way. So I thank you for the opportunity to talk about it, but that's where my heart lies. And I am encouraging the city of Detroit to consider vesting their trust in me to return back to DPSCD School Board.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being on. I got to have you back because we didn't even talk about some of the other stuff I want to talk about, and that's your nursing background and position as president of DMC in Harper. And I know you've had some things to do with the City of Detroit Health Department. And I'd like for you to talk to us about the City of Detroit Health Department and some of the things that are important to our constituents, to our community, as relates to how the health department helps people. People don't know. They just don't know. And I'd like you to come back and bring some of that information to our listeners so that they understand that there is help out there and you can help them know where to go to get it as it relates to vaccinations and all sorts of other health issues. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate
Absolutely.
you. And now, as we always close with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, it says, "Not everyone can be famous, but everyone can be great, because greatness is determined by service. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love." Thank you for joining the Community Bell Show. We'll see you next Monday at 4 o'clock, everyone. Have a great week.
The views and opinions expressed on the previous broadcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of WVTC Radio Detroit, its advertisers, or affiliates.
Thank you for listening to Community Bell with your host, former Wayne County Commissioner Edna Bell. This broadcast was brought to you by WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, our website, www.wvtcradio.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users. If you've enjoyed this broadcast, tell a friend to tune in. We'll see you next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern to the Community Bell Show, right here on WVTC Radio Detroit. You're listening to WVTC Gospel Radio Detroit, and we're flowing in the Spirit.